Welcome to TechLeader Voices, where we help enterprise decision makers navigate AI transformation. Today I have with me Paola Annis. Paola is a CTO at one of the biggest Italian ratings agencies and also a published author with a book called The Road to Azure Cost Governance. In her career, Paola has held product management roles, solution architect roles, and has come off the back of a long stint at Microsoft that's culminated in a principal engineering manager role as well. Welcome, Paola. Would you say that's a fair characterization of your career so far?
Thank you very much. It's a wonderful one. I feel like I'm more of an onion. I have a lot of layers. I would have to add a lot more stuff than that, but it takes time. So this one was perfect.
Okay, brilliant. It's great to have you here. Now, today, the topic that we've chosen to talk about is FinOps and AI cost governance. FinOps is one of your favorite topics. Can you let me know why the topic has so much appeal to you and why is it so important?
I would say that this passion about FinOps comes from a time when FinOps wasn't really called that. It was just probably cloud optimization. And it was for me and for the customers that I was working with, realizing that there was a massive shift in how costs were now run in IT. And we had to do something about that. So the first step was the book that I wrote with my co-author, Giuliano. And this was actually a description of our journey. We started, he was my customer when I was at Microsoft. We were migrating a massive data center into the cloud, and they weren't happy about the cost. And so we struggled for, I would say, almost a year to bring down cost and to, let's say, to deploy this type of process, which is today called FinOps. And we started as customer and vendor, and we ended up writing a book together. He is now one of my best friends. This is basically one of the reasons. The other one, which is not less important, is my Green Software Foundation role, meaning that when you waste resources, it doesn't matter if you're wasting money. This might be a choice. And in some cases, many companies decide that they don't care about FinOps because they can get, let's make an example. If my FinOps operation will bring me 10% cloud cost saving, maybe I can go to the vendor and negotiate that 10% discount. So I don't have to do anything. I would just pay less. And I can get there, but I am still wasting resources and power and electricity and carbon intensity with the things that I'm doing. So that is the second main reason why I'm in FinOps, because we need to do it. If you don't want to do it for the money, then you should do it for the planet.
That's very compelling indeed.
Yes.
So can you let me know if there are any blind spots you still see in how other leaders are talking about cloud costs in particular?
The biggest problem with FinOps, FinOps is wonderful. It's a framework, it works, it's very general, but also very specific in the way that it's presented. It's an open framework. Everyone can go and educate themselves, do certifications. There's a lot of resources online. So you would ask, why aren't companies all doing this? And so I would say that the biggest turnoff for companies is still the discipline that is required to run a FinOps framework. It requires a lot of effort and discipline to be consistent and to be specific about the initiatives, about how they want to run the FinOps. And because it touches all the departments in a company, that's also another difficult point, because it's okay if you have engineers running FinOps. We're used to, I still feel like an engineer. So we're used to, getting stuff done within IT. But now you have finance at the table. Now you have HR at the table, and putting together everything is so difficult especially in large companies, that this is still a main issue of FinOps adoption.
Mm-hmm. I see. So Paola, would you be able to run through the FinOps framework for me at a very simple level?
Yeah. So at the very, very basic level, it is a continuous cycle of improvement where you basically inform So you understand what's happening in your cloud operations and how much you're spending and get control of everything that you're doing in the cloud. Then you start optimize. You run initiatives where you save money and then put them in operation. So these become automated. And then you start. So that's a cycle of optimization which you can find in many, many other frameworks. So it's not new. It is an optimization framework in the end. It's only applied to cloud and to cloud resources, which is a bit more difficult because cloud resources are, on one hand, super very technical, but also they cost money. While in the past we didn't have that. We had the super very technical on one side and the finance on the other side. Finance bought servers, and then whatever you did with your servers and your hardware was, the engineer's realm, and no one would touch that. But now engineers are buying cloud resources. Engineers can spin 10,000 cores of compute resources in a few minutes and spend millions potentially. And in some cases, they don't even know that they're spending millions. So, and then, finance has to foot the bill and,
Mm-hmm.
and they realize that they don't know what they're buying because it's a subscription model and it's very, very technical. So that's the tough part of it.
Okay. So FinOps, I'm hearing, basically helps with this kind of shift to more subscription-based models of finance, basically.
Yes, basically,
Yeah.
it will give you control of your spend, which is the first question that when I was in Microsoft, I used to work on this type of engagements, even as a manager, because I really like the topics. And I would simply go and ask the first question, what is your daily spend? How much are you spending daily, and how is this spend divided by, let's say, compute, storage, and other stuff? And I would say that I rarely found immediate answers to this question because the answers were, oh, I know how much I'm spending monthly. I know about the storage, but I don't know about compute. And then I have reservations. So it's tough to give you a number, but you need to know from the top of your head this answer. If you are in control of your spending, of your cloud spend, you need to know how much you're spending daily
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and where the money is going. The second question is, what are your top three spenders?
I remember when we were doing the pre-work, you indicated that a lot of companies just don't know at all, basically.
Yeah, they don't know how much they're spending. They know that how much they're spending maybe on a monthly basis because that's the vendor's bill. When it comes,
Mm-hmm.
then you have harsh reality comes in, and now you're facing a bill. But if you know daily, for example, you could catch spikes, unexpected spikes, mistakes. Sometimes there are mistakes in the bill. Sometimes there are spikes that are caused by applications running havoc, and if you don't know, you just realize it at the end of the month, and now
Mm-hmm.
it's too late because you've already overspent.
So, just in the context of the FinOps framework, in the event that we find these spikes, or for instance, we find that costs start getting out of control, does the framework specify what should be done?
Well, ideally, if you're able to identify spikes, you should also find a way to automate the mitigation. So find the spikes that could be, for example, a seasonal issue or a happy problem. You have Black Friday and now your application is running because you have a lot of customers. So that's a happy problem. But now you know. So if you know, then the next time that you have this seasonality, you know how to operate, you know how to scale up, but also to scale down. That's another super big mistake. Companies are very keen on scaling up, but then they forget scaling down and still paying over provisioning and paying for the peaks of your application, not the average, which should be the standard in cloud. Also, now we have this wonderful thing which is AI, and that helps because there are tools embedded in the vendors' tools. There are third-party
Mm.
tools, capabilities, but mostly this type of problems like spikes are immediately identified by AI running into the cloud cost operations. And so you have this type of help that
Mm-hmm.
give you more insight into what's happening in the data center.
I got you. Yeah, so since you mentioned AI and a conversation will kind of tend toward this AI cost governance topic, you spoke to me last time actually about when leaders ask if an AI project is generally worth it in terms of this return on investment metrics. You think the conversation is often ran without having any control of the cloud cost. And then you said to me that you can't calculate a cost for an AI project if your cloud costs are not controlled. So would you be able to tell me what the signals are that like an organization's cloud environment can support a credible AI return on investment analysis?
So, okay, this is a very, very wide question because an AI project could span different technologies, different clouds and models, and different ways of doing. So let's pick an example because it might be easier to understand where I'm going. I am running an application which somehow hooks into an LLM model, which is a prepackaged model. I don't have any type of tweaks into the model. I just get my answers. And the way this works cost-wise is I'm paying tokens, which is number of words that I send to the LLM and then number of words that are sent back to me. Okay, so in the number of words that I send, which is the prompt, there's a whole a bunch of literature on prompt engineering. That is crucial to how costs are done. Optimizing prompts would be the first thing. So how can you know your prompts? So let's say that you're saying, okay, I want to run this application and it will talk to AI and then give me back some responses and I will use those responses. How much will it cost? It depends on the prompt. Because if my prompt is a two-liner, then okay, it's relatively cheap. My prompt is 50 lines, then it's very specific. And the answer will be also super specific and super precise, avoid the hallucinations and whatsoever, but it might be costly. So now I need to find the balance between what I really need as an output, what's the quality that I need, and how much it will cost, and how many prompts I'm doing on a daily basis or on an hourly basis. It depends on the application. So you see the variables, many here, but it's important to know how an LLM works before starting to consider the cost.
Okay. What is the kind of biggest misunderstanding, would you say, the leaders have when it comes to how LLM works?
That doesn't have to do with cost. The biggest misunderstanding is thinking it will never make mistakes. And it's so adoption of an LLM means somehow understanding this, that this is a statistic, that there's an article, a very interesting article published for a university. We can send the link to our audience if they want.
Yes, please.
Called Stochastic Parrots. So this is a parrot that is imitating the human language. It doesn't check for correct answers. It wants to give you answers as a first thing. So with the prompt, you can avoid incorrect answers, avoid hallucination, but in the end, it's always going to happen. So the adoption phase here is understanding this, understanding how it works, and then somehow making up for it by reading the output and then correcting the mistakes. Means you cannot get content that is really specific without knowing what the content are. And now I'm crushing the dreams of many startups.
It's good for them.
But this is the reality today. Maybe it will change. There are talks about AGI, artificial general intelligence coming to us, which is not language related. It will be overall Skynet is in the future. I don't know. But right now, what I tell my people is read the answers, correct the answers all the time.
That's a really good soundbite. I like that. Okay, so if we move on to kind of an adjacent area, which is this kind of idea of hidden costs. Yeah, you mentioned that generally the hidden costs around kind of an AI project or an LLM project would be around scaling, and companies not knowing if users will use their application once a day or 100 times a day, or if they'll just reject the technology altogether. There's actually a A quote from a Gartner analyst I found that claims if CIOs don't fully understand the cost of scaling generative AI, they could miscalculate by 500% to 1000%.
Yes.
So could you firstly just break down for us the different elements in an AI costing?
Yes. So we mentioned that so first of all, you have your application, because it's not just the AI. You need to have a use case. So your application which hooks into the AI model and asks questions to get answers. So the first cost is your infrastructure and how the application scales. This is independent of AI. It's just how your application is built in the cloud and how easy it will scale. But guess what? Now you're offering a technology that is a hype that everyone wants to use. So maybe your application didn't scale to millions of customers yesterday, but today you're offering AI and now it might. The first question would be, is your application ready to scale without um, impacting heavily on your cost? Translates into, is your application a microservices application where you can only scale the part that is going into the AI and everything else will stay the same? Okay, so that's the first layer of cost. Then you have the cost of tokens, how to speak with the model and somehow get your answers back. You have the cost of storage, because at some point you will want to keep those answers. And it could be for regulatory reasons, it could be for research purpose. Maybe you think, okay, I'm going to research on that later on and see what people ask most and what were the answers. And then you might want to build your own LLM at some point. I mean, there are many reasons why you would want to keep the conversations. And another big reason is the fine tuning, because at some point you can upload those conversations back to the AI saying, hey, this is my bunch of conversations and you got to learn from it, because the people who were conversing with you corrected you, and now you have to learn the correction and fine tune the model according to what my business is about. And that is another cost, the fine tuning cost. Mm-hmm. And then you have the cost of the developers. I mean, it can go as wide as you want. Developer, the cost of the people who do the prompts, the end user application, if there is one, mm-hmm. It has a cost. There might be a cost on the edge if you're exchanging data and storage or images on the edge, and then you need to pay for the edge technology that will host your data in the edge. Your application might be multi-regional, so now you could add, or multi-cloud, so now you could add tools and platforms that help you do multi-cloud and multi-region smoothly, and that's another cost adding up. So you see, it's a very, very wide topic, and I'm sure I forgot something about this, because it really depends on the use case and the application that it's tied to.
Okay, so if you had to kind of ground us or kind of give us a priority for these kind of different sources of costs, which would you say was the most important to pay attention to, or like maybe the biggest, the big cost sink, or the most dangerous one?
Well, the most important part would be to build your application in a way that it can scale safely. So that if I got 1 million requests on the AI, only that portion will scale. Mm-hmm. I have 0 requests on the AI, okay, it can scale somewhere else because it's an application and I can have other services on top of it. So that would be the first thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, and this is an element that's overlooked, is what you're saying?
Well, I don't know that it's overlooked. I'm sure that software engineers know very, very well what they're doing. It might be overlooked from leaders, because our feeds are constantly about AI. You have to run an AI application. You have to integrate AI into your daily. So we're constantly bombarded by this message that you need to do it, and sometimes you just turn around to your teams and say, hey, we got to do it. I don't care about what, but we have to do it. And that's what's overlooked, because if you're not doing it for the use case, you're just doing it for the hype, then maybe your use case is not solid enough to jump into that. Mm-hmm. And for the consequences of not having a solid use case. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I learned in my experience is you gotta know your target demographics, because not all demographics, not all generations are happy to converse with the AI. And so your target demographics is not used to this type of interactions. Here I'm thinking about a conversational AI with customers, for example. Now, if your target demographics is, I don't know, if I say boomers, does it sound, I mean, that's how the generation is called, but it's called that for a reason, right? I'm Gen X, by the way, so I'm saying. But if your target demographics is boomer, maybe they don't want to, because they refused to talk to an IVR back in the days, and now they're refusing to chat with a bot. So maybe you're wasting a lot of money for something that will not end well, because it will not be adopted. On the other hand, the native digital, what we call my teenager kids, they are ready. They will do anything. So anything digital you throw at them, they will just, learn and consume. That's, as quick as it sounds. And so that's a very good demographics to experiment, because in the end, everything we're doing with AI now is still in the experimental phase. There is no killer application, killer use case that, wow, it's done. This is why AI was born.
Okay. That's an opinion for sure.
Oh yeah, sure. My opinion. Well, you could argue that there are killer applications for. I read an article a few weeks ago of an entire generation using AI for psychological help. So that might be a killer application, because it seems like you're talking to a human, and if you don't know what's happening behind the scenes, technology-wise, you might think that this is really AGI. It's an intelligent being that is conversing with you. It's not. Spoiler. Not yet. We're not there yet. And it's super dangerous. It's not made, I mean, unless we have applications, and I think I read something that was advertised on the New York Metro last week. I think it was an application called friend.com, something like that. So unless it's an application that is targeted to do that, and so has safety measures and guardrails and guidelines to the AI on how to deal with people safely, then using your ChatGPT as your friend is not a good idea. Still my opinion. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've seen a lot of backlash around that type of thing. I think I know the thing you're talking about actually with the friend. Yeah, so if we just move back to cost a little bit, what would you say is the best way to build realistic usage assumptions when you say that usage is so unpredictable, potentially?
So if you're running a big company or a big IT shop anyway, you will have spikes and you will have unpredicted costs anyway. Okay, so, and the FinOps framework cannot avoid that, of course, because this is the way the business works. You will have spikes, and the best way of dealing with those spikes is understanding. So trying to understand why you had this unexpected cost, and then embed policies and automation to mitigate that. So if the spikes were mistakes or issues with the application, then you can mitigate with automation. If the spikes were on the business side, you can mitigate with auto scaling up and down. So there are ways to embed policies so that everything is automated to the point that you only look at the unexpected cost as a delta.
Okay. And you've seen this kind of approach works well in practice. Do you have any kind of examples?
It works. Yeah, it works well, because let me give you an example, real life example. We had a database, very large database with storage that was on very expensive storage, very expensive, because you need the IOPS, the input output per second. You need the performance of the disk, because the database is huge and needs performance. So now you put it on very expensive storage, and then you think, okay, this is an unexpected cost, because in my on-prem data center, that storage was right above the server. Now the storage is maybe in a different data center 40 miles from your compute server. And so you have problems with latency, and then you have to deal with this type of things by adding hardware, adding money, basically. So that was an unexpected cost. How we dealt with it was first optimizing the database. That always helps. So I always say, if your applications are not spick and span, if they're not perfect, and they're wobbly or not solid enough, when you bring them to the cloud, all the problems will surface like bubbles. They will come out. So you will need to fix your application. And same is with database. If the database is not solid, the queries are not solid, and you have stratified things from 10 years, 20 years of handling this type of data, which is what happens in real life, you will pay, literally, you will pay money because of this. So we went back, we optimized the database, and then we even went into some automation called demand shaping, where basically you shape the service tier according to what's really needed. Not spikes, not even reactive shaping, but really demand. I know that my performance is going up, and so now I need the higher tier of storage. I will bring my storage to the higher tier, and then when I don't need it anymore, I go back to a lower tier and spend less money. This way, I have optimized the storage and saved maybe 40% of the cost. And that's a real example.
That's brilliant. Demand shaping, if people want to look that up. Yeah. So how does that actually work? If we can like dive a little deeper. So you're saying you're ignoring the spikes when you do this demand shaping.
I am not ignoring the spikes. I'm scaling up the tier well, the spike in this case is a spike in performance. I need lower latency, higher IOPS. Okay. I'm talking about a specific service because this was a very specific, it was a NetApp files application, which is an NFS storage. And the NFS storage has three tiers. One is the standard, then you have a higher premium and ultra, something like that. Okay. So you need the ultra tier to run a very high number of IOPS, but everything else can run on the standard, and the standard costs sensibly less than the ultra tier. So when the spike comes, you check on your monitoring tools because you know that the number of requests from the database is increasing. And when it gets to a certain point, now you push an automation that will change the tier on the run. It's just a script. It's a 2-line script, which will basically update the tier and go to the ultra tier. The ultra tier is super expensive, but you're using it just for the time that it takes for your database to pass that moment of struggle, I would say. And then once you see that the performances are going down again, the performance request is going down again, now you bring it back to the standard tier. So the ultra tier, which would have cost you double in terms of storage, now only costs double for a limited amount of time in the day, which is when you really need that performance. And for the rest of the day, it's standard, and so you pay half the price.
Okay, well that makes sense. I don't know if that was too in the weeds for some listeners, but it was good to have it anyway.
Go and search for it. And demand shaping, I mean, this is an example that I've followed in real life, and it's also explained in the book. But there are many, many examples out there because demand shaping is all about PaaS services, which is, I would say, the nice thing about cloud, as a platform for developers is having those PaaS services. I always joke because a very, very famous developer at Microsoft once told us in a venue, he said, I've built for 20 years of my career, I've built my entire 20 years career as a developer on something that today is just a slider in a box.
Mm-hmm.
So these things happen. Now we have sliders that decide how to scale up and down, how to do high availability between sites, type of stuff it used to be very, very hard for developers to run. Now you have everything in the cloud platform, and it's wonderful. It's easy to use, but the PaaS services are very expensive, and so demand shaping will help you mitigate. It doesn't work with all of the PaaS services. With some of them it does, but it will help you mitigate the cost.
So I want to pick you up on something you mentioned just moments ago about a cloud, an application. Once you put it in the cloud, it will kind of amplify all of the issues that you might have in the application, but might be hidden. This kind of ties into what you were saying to me before about how companies went into the cloud thinking they would save money, but none of them did. This is a direct quote from you. So if we could this is a bit conceptual, I suppose, but if you could ground us in the kind of thinking around where the actual defensible value in cloud is.
Yes. Well, just think about this. When I was in Microsoft and we were quoting cloud services, we were quoting the exact value of what was needed. So practical examples. I was saying the developer environment, I don't need it in the night and I don't need it in the weekend. So I will only quote it for 8 hours a day, maybe 9 if you want to be, include the lunch break. Okay, so 9 hours a day. And then when we went in production, none of them wanted to switch off their developer environments. And now you're paying twice. You're actually paying more than twice because 24 hours is actually 3 times the
Yeah.
hours that I was, and the weekends, the full weekends. So this is what happened in reality, that people who were used to run on-prem data centers, and it's only true about migrations. So that means that companies that are cloud native and were doing business directly in the cloud don't have this bias. But the majority of companies run by old people like me, they were starting from on-premises. And in on-premises, over-allocation was the rule. The rule of thumb was, okay, I'm going to buy 2 servers, but maybe I will buy 3. So one, because in the 3 years that these servers are going to be in my company, maybe I will need one more, to do research, to accommodate the storage, the increased usage. And so once you have it, you don't care if it's switched on 24/7 because it's yours. It's in the basement and you're not paying by the hour. Now you're in the cloud and you moved everything. So I had, we used to joke saying that these were VM huggers. We had the VM huggers. They wouldn't let go of their VM. They were like their babies. They didn't want to switch them off or just, delete. Because at some point you find one of the things that the FinOps framework tells you to do is to run the so-called orphaned resource script. There are scripts for orphaned resources for all clouds, and they will go and check that you left stuff there for nothing. You left backups, you left disks, you left virtual machines, public IP addresses. I mean, these are maybe $2 per month, okay, an IP address. But what if you left, I don't know, 1,000? And not mentioning, as I said earlier, that this is all resources that are consuming power and they are consuming carbon. So emit carbon into the atmosphere for nothing. So the cultural shift, back to your question, the cultural shift between on-prem and cloud was like hitting a wall for people in IT. And this is why none of the migrations were really saving money until they started doing FinOps.
Okay.
While the beauty of the cloud is exactly the same thing that is negative for migration, which is the flexibility. That you can switch on and then off and delete stuff in minutes. And if I remember when I was younger and we used to ask for lab resources, having lab resources was a coveted thing, because you need to go and ask for permission and then order a server. The server would arrive. You had to install the operating system and then install the thing you needed to do the lab for. And then you had it there. So if this was just a week of testing stuff, now you have a server sitting on your lab for nothing and you bought it and it's there. It's a waste. You felt guilty. I felt guilty. I have this thing about not wasting stuff and resources. And now with the cloud, you can say, okay, let's test this new model of AI and make an application. And in a week, I will make this new thing and run it and test it. And then once I've done the test, and maybe I have used infrastructure as a code. So I've scripted everything. When I delete it, I do it so lightheartedly because I really don't care. I can create it back in minutes and it will be exactly as I wanted it because I've maybe spent a week creating all the scripts with I don't know, Terraform, Bicep, whatever the infrastructure as a code tool you want to use. And that means that you can delete it anytime you want, even developer environment, even that, the developer environment, you can decide that you can just delete it, not even switch it off, because switch off resources, you still have storage to pay.
Right.
But you could decide, I have such a great infrastructure as a code script that I can, Terraform apply and Terraform destroy whatever I want and have the same quality of stuff that I'm used to without paying the price.
So the answer is basically flexibility is the value in cloud.
Flexibility and also the past products that are doing stuff. I remember when I jumped in the cloud that I was in a different company in the previous company. And in this previous company, a colleague of mine was testing stuff. And he said, I tried this new thing, the cloud, and it was a PaaS service which would provide all the basics like the high availability, the disaster recovery. This was not to be developed because you already had it. You just had to develop your own stuff, which is your core business, and don't care about all the underlying stuff. And the guy said, it took my team 1/5 of the time to develop in this technology. So that's the power of cloud, that now you don't have to care about all the things that you used to develop back in the days because they're already there in the past services. You just switch it on and now you have your database ready. You don't have to deploy anything. You just buy your chunk of service and deploy your application. It runs like a charm. It's already highly available, redundant, multi-regional, whatever you want with Edge, anything you want about an application, it's already there, and it is really a developer platform. So that's the second thing about the cloud.
So all of these things should really feed into how leaders think about return on investment then when it comes to cloud models.
Oh, yes. Do not move your old boxes from one room to another because this other room is more costly if you're just moving boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Need to somehow open the boxes and reorganize them, optimize them, and then move them once they're optimized. Decide, in some cases, I've seen customers say, okay, I will migrate because now I have a compelling reason for migration, but then I will stay in that state for maybe 1 or 2 years while migrating all the applications to go cloud native. That is also a strategy that I have seen, and you need to accept that you will be overpaying cloud services for a while, but then in the end, you will have the flexibility and the platform that the cloud offers.
Okay, that makes sense. And just to kind of follow up on what you said about these VM huggers, just my own curiosity, why is it that people don't want to switch off these resources?
Why?
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, there was an article that described this feeling like pet versus cattle.
Okay, really?
Yes. So your VM, the VM huggers, they think as VM as their pet. They name it, they give it a name, and they watch how it feels, and then they get metrics, performance metrics. They monitor it daily. It's really a pet for them. And then
Okay.
you have the Kubernetes people, they spin nodes like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah.
Those are kettles. You don't care if it
Right, okay.
goes down, if it's off, because you spin another one. So these are the two sides of the medal, two
So
faces.
it's like a psychological thing, really, then.
It's purely psychological.
Okay. That's pretty cool, actually.
Let me ask you something. Do you delete your old storage stuff?
No, I don't.
There you go.
There you go. There's your answer. Yeah. Okay.
How
That's a
many
very fair point.
how many times have you used your I don't know, your email from 10 years ago?
But actually, for me, this is still my primary email. So I'm probably an exception, though.
So, but for all people like me, if you ask me how many times have you used your email from the previous, or your documents from your previous employer? Never,
Yeah.
never. So backups, storage, but the old pictures is a different thing because all pictures,
Have some value, hopefully.
have emotional value. But do you really need 20 pictures of that meal you had
Yeah.
4 years ago and you put all the angles of the picture? Maybe you just need one.
Yeah. Quite right. Okay. So how about we move on to a topic that is more about kind of all of these services that these vendors provide when it comes to, for example, if you're setting out to start an AI project, today, you've got lots of choice, right, about how to source and run your models. There's stuff like, third-party hosted open source. There's public cloud AI platforms. There's like hybrid. How should costs be modeled differently across these options?
Wow. This is another super wide question.
Yeah.
We already touched some of it earlier when we said it's all about the application. So you would need to carefully. So first of all, you need a use case. You don't do AI for AI.
Yeah.
You don't do AI because your fellow CTO is doing AI. You
Mm-hmm.
want to do it because it's worth it and you have a use case. So you have a use case, it means you have an application to the AI. And now if you have an application and maybe it's already in the cloud, so now you know how the application is costing you today, then you have to just calculate the delta of adding AI. And adding AI brings the complexity of understanding the type of adoption that you want your end users in the end, which could be internal, external, it depends on the use case and the application. So I think we touched all of these topics already, and I don't have anything to add except reiterate that that you need to know very well how your application scales to cost, especially if you want to do AI integrated into the application.
Yeah. Okay. I had a follow-up question that was around which one of these models create the most hidden costs. I wonder if that's too in-depth.
I don't think I know the answer to that
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like hidden costs are not, let me think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So hidden costs are not hiding in the model. They are still hiding in your application and how the application will use the model. So you need to know your application very well, which I assume because it's your own that you and need to know how you're planning to integrate into the LLM model. And then if there are hidden costs, there will be about, again, adoption, how your users are um, using the AI integration that you provided.
Okay.
One of the things I feel like every LLM owner realized is there is no limit to how people will use an application.
Mm.
So anything you will think about is still not enough to understand how people will use your application. Because you think of usability, you think of use cases, you test limits, you test potential issues, you test everything, and still when it goes online, you will find that thing
Mm-hmm.
no one thought about, and it's hiding a potential cost spike.
So it is just more about the end user usage rather than any particular vendor service.
Let's recap because it was a wide answer. So it was a wide question with the articulated
Yes.
answer. So first, you need to know your application and how it scales because it might scale in ways that you haven't expected using AI. Second, you need to know how your AI, the model of your choice, is integrated into your application and how the costs are accounted. If it's token, then now you know that everything is within your prompt. If it's something else, then you will need to know how it scales. And third, so this is three things in the end. Third, you need to know how your users, whether it's internal or external, are going to leverage that new integration that you're offering. And this might spike differently because users are users and you never know how they're planning to use your tool.
Got you. Yeah, that's a great summary. Thank you. If I could just jump around to, again, maybe talking a bit more about the FinOps framework in particular. I had two different directions of questions. So, firstly, when I read on the FinOps site, they kind of talks about the interplay between cost, accuracy, and performance. This is all kind of trade-offs, I suppose. Are there any other trade-offs that are missing here that the FinOps site didn't?
Yes, yes, there is
Yeah,
the biggest one is security.
right. Yes, that is a big one.
The super big one, and it's always overlooked. And I don't know why, but I remember running initiatives where we said, okay, we don't want to sacrifice security, so we will help you downsize your costs so that you can invest in security, because this is very, very often overlooked. And the security issue, the digital security issue, from COVID on, you had all these hackers sitting at home doing nothing, having all the time in the world to do stuff. So the attacks spiked in a way that never did before. So I would say that is the main overlooked trade-off.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. I mean, I suppose we could dig in and ask kind of what parts of security are overlooked the most.
So there is right now there's a shift left, meaning that the idea is to build security into application as soon as possible. Just even when you start designing your application, you should think about security and not just adding security as a second thought.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, we need to add security, which was how we did security back in the days. There was no security in the internet. There were barely passwords. So we started adding security to applications and tools later on. Now you should do it before, and this leaning left is really it really resonates with the FinOps framework, because the FinOps framework is really saying the same thing. You should think about cost when you build your application, not after, when you get the bill from the vendor and now it's paid. So what I say is trade-offs are documented. You have a lot of information from the websites of all the vendors, from AWS, Azure, from Google. And so think about security, performance, and cost right when you are building your idea of the application, so that when you design it, you already have these three things and you don't have to trade off because they are already embedded in your
Mm-hmm.
plan.
Yeah, so I think what I understand about FinOps is that it's crucially cross-functional, and I imagine that security is a responsibility not just of one function, but it's kind of spread across everybody. Is that right?
Yes, definitely, but in real life, often it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is, sometimes you find situations where security was overlooked or sacrificed because of cost reasons, and the application needed performance, and then it needed to scale, and it needed the brand new PaaS product, PaaS service on cloud, and then you took somehow shortcuts for security. So maybe it is not completely overlooked, but a shortcut is a shortcut, and
Mm.
once you have it, this is where the hackers will go.
Yeah. You create vulnerabilities. I see. Do you have like an example of a specific shortcut? It might be interesting.
I have seen many with identity management,
Mm-hmm.
with privilege access, for example, using privilege access for cloud resources without managing it. Now there are tools to do that. But when we started with cloud, you used to grant privilege access to people and to applications and to resources in the cloud, and then you didn't have control of your privileged access. So that is something that I have seen very, very often overlooked. And once you go back and think, okay, but this is a privileged access that could potentially destroy my whole operations, including the backup. Because I saw an article a few months ago where a company was a victim of a ransomware, and backup was in the same place where everything else was.
Right. Okay.
The ransom included the backup that could have saved the company.
Yeah.
So this is an example of overlooking, choosing to back up your system, which is great, but you don't protect yourself from this type of events where they can ransom everything, including your backup.
Yeah. No, that's great. I wondered if you had any examples of organizations you've seen who do AI cost governance right.
When you say AI cost governance, do you
Mm.
cost governance of AI application or AI driven cost governance?
I mean the former.
Okay. So you have AI deployed in your applications and you want to do cost governance. I think it's still early with that. I haven't seen many structured companies. There are companies who are very virtuous in their FinOps practice. And I'm sure that they are doing AI experimentation. I haven't seen a structured approach yet to this.
Okay. Okay. And then I assume for the latter option, I mean, you mentioned as well, AI is already embedded into many of
Yeah,
these kind of.
using AI for your cost control, I think it's a very, very good use case for AI.
Mhm.
It's it boils down to analyzing a large amount of data, which is your cloud bills, especially if you have multi-cloud. Think about
Mm.
you have to extract those bills, transform and normalize because the VMs model, the storage, they're different. They're called different names. They don't match with each other. Even the tiers are different. So how do you normalize costs? And so building, for example, with the help of AI, building your own custom metrics and then um, import everything from your multi-cloud shop. That will help you control your costs, and it would be very easy rather than building your usual database Excel file or in-house tool or even third-party tools. I think AI at some point embedded into the FinOps process will somehow substitute the cost tools, even the open FinOps tools, because do everything for you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And so my closing question, which I think actually we've kind of covered, to
That's
be honest, but it's so if you imagine you've got your CTO hat on, when you're confronted with an idea for a new AI initiative, whether that's, coming to you via a PRD, like a demo yourself from the rest of the board, or user demand, how do you begin exploring feasibility?
so, well, I'm an enthusiast for technology, so any idea will have a test run.
Mhm.
And as I mentioned earlier, the cloud is perfect because you can spin up
Mm.
a lab in minutes and then delete it in minutes the same. So I like working in what we call the fail fast way of doing
Yeah.
stuff. And also because technology is moving very fast today with AI and everything. So you need to know what works now. And if it takes you 6 months to deploy an AI test, in 6 months, that thing that you integrated will probably be different. My approach would be to move fast, deploy an MVP, a minimum viable product in the cloud, use infrastructure as a code. So just in case you need to redo it again, you have everything and it takes minutes. And then once you see that it works and it's not what you wanted, just, wipe it out.
So you mentioned this kind of 6 month time frame being a bit too long. I probably agree, right? But how would you time box like a new test in that case?
Of course, it depends on the complexity because
Of course.
the complexity of the integration, but an MVP should not take more than a month to deploy, and in my opinion, because if it takes more, then it's no longer an MVP, and you risk wasting money into something that might not even. So, but ideally 1-2 weeks is my sweet spot.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's very quick, actually.
Super
Yeah.
quick.
Okay. Nice. Okay. I think that's a good question to end on. But I want to ask, is there anything we haven't covered that you would like to just talk a bit more about?
There is a lot of stuff we haven't covered, but I'm happy to answer questions if there are any. I'm active on LinkedIn and on Twitter. It's no longer called Twitter; it's X. But yeah, happy to answer more questions offline, and I hope this was a good chat. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Would you like to tell everybody what you're working on right now?
What I'm working on right now, I cannot tell. Unfortunately, the agency is a regulated company,
Yeah,
and so it is not possible to share this type of things, but we are experimenting a lot.
that's brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Paola, for taking the time to have this conversation.
And thank you for having me.